Well, I was actually at my grandpa's house as my family was building a new house next door, and I remember waking up with the radio on, and I heard it over the radio, and I really was like, wait, what's going on? Kind of went over, got the TV on, looked it up, and just saw everything happen, started calling my family, stuff like that. Like, it was pretty devastating just, that could actually take place.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, at the time I was living in New York City, actually. And I remember that day very, very well, as everybody who lived in New York does. The thing I remember was remarkable was that morning there were a lot of problems with the subway. Earlier that day I'd gone to the polling place because they were having a primary election for the mayor that year. And so I voted in that, and I got stuck on the subway and I was late getting to work. I used to work for the Museum of Natural History. And when I got to the Museum of Natural History, I used to be able to go in through the subway entrance. They had it closed that day. And I said to someone, boy, what's going on this morning? Everything's screwed up. And they said, they told me what had happened. And like everybody else, my first thought was that it had been like a guy flying a small plane or something. And then so I said, no, it was terrorists, it was airliners. And I couldn't believe that, but I got in the building and somebody had it up on the internet and I could see it. So I went up on the roof of the building, and where I was too far away to actually, we couldn't see the Trade Center itself, but I could see the huge, terrible plume of smoke coming up. And I remember I thought the same thing that I thought when I stood on the deck of the Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor, that I'm standing looking at something that means the start of terrible trouble and terrible death all around the world for thousands and millions of people. And it was certainly a terrible, terrible day, and the things that have happened in the wake of it have been as dreadful, and perhaps even more so in many cases.
I mean, it didn't have an impact in my immediate life, but I mean, I do have friends who people lost some of their family members and whatnot in the plane crashes. So I think we should remember that because people did lose some people, and it still hurts me to this day.
I think that was like the first real moment where it was like an actual terrorist attack actually happened like directly in the United States. I know we had like Pearl Harbor and stuff, but we never really had like they bombed the World Trade Center a couple of years before that, but it was never nothing that drastic.
I think I wasn't sad because I didn't understand at the time. All I knew was that the buildings were falling down and people were dying. And someone told me that there was going to be a threat in Chicago, I believe. And that's pretty close to where I live, so I started worrying about my family. And I don't really think I had any other emotions other than what's going on, scared, confused.
America became more patriotic and unified, but in doing so, some groups of people also kind of had a hatred for another group of people, which I'm talking about the Middle Eastern, whether they lived here in America, whether they live overseas. And even though most of the people became more patriotic and unified, we still kind of created a stigma for Middle Eastern people. And I remember the vandalism that a lot of Middle Eastern people faced, and a lot of the hatred and hateful comments, which still happens today.
I would say it kind of brought us together for a short period of time, and I think unfortunately it hasn't had that big of a long-lasting effect. I think it was more of a temporary, short-term, really brought the country together. But I'd say long-term, I don't think that we're kind of giving it the importance it really needs.
You should remember this day because it was a very devastating time. We lost so many of our people. Even if you don't know anybody that actually died in the building, it still affected America as a whole. And so we should always remember that.
So to the 11th, I guess the biggest thing that I have to say, it's kind of like a time of turmoil for us. I mean, because the way I see it is that it was just like that event that, was destined to shape America. Unfortunately, it was a tragic event, but because of how severe it was, because of how traumatic it was, it helped shape our country and helped mold it into what we are today.
And those are the people I feel, those are the victims who I think I really have the greatest sympathy for. People who have no political axe to grind, people who aren't trying to do anything to anybody else, people who are just going about their daily business, loving their families, trying to live their lives, that circumstances around the world started by people they don't even know have come along to engulf them and bring misery and sadness to them. So, those are the people, that I think about. Everybody from the American servicemen and women who've lost their lives and their families to just, the terrible loss of civilian life in Iraq and Afghanistan, too.